Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, January 10th. Just got off work. Feeling quite a bit better today. Yeah, as expected, I suppose. Today is movie day. So, the last couple weeks, maybe, I've had to try and find maybe, at least last week I had to find a shorter movie. Short evening, didn't have as much time, so I've watched a few things that have been a little bit shorter, instead of returning, as I so desire, to James Bond, 007. For the last of the films in this set, there's one more after this that I own separately, that I bought after buying this set, but it's the last of this original set that I bought a couple years ago when I started movie day, and I decided I'm gonna watch through the James Bond movies. There's some of those I haven't seen. This is one of them. This is Spectre. This is one that, like, when it came out, like, I considered going to see it. I was like, Spectre. And at that point, I'd seen Skyfall and been like, Skyfall was good. I liked Skyfall. And then they were doing Spectre. And the thing about Spectre is that ties into, like, all the Blofeld stuff and all those old stories. And I'm like, are they modernizing those somehow? And I don't know. Maybe. I ended up deciding not to go see it and not to look into it. I really have no idea. I don't know if they're modernizing the Blofeld stories. Are they, obviously a large part of that story also tied into the whole thing with, was it Tracy, his wife? Which he had, like the woman that he fell for and had, basically like the misery. Like, are they going to tie that into whatever the woman from Casino Royale, who he'd, had affection for, that has already affected Quantum of Solace? Are they going to go back to that? Skyfall didn't have huge impacts on the previous movies, so are they just starting some whole new little plot thread here with Spectre? I don't know. But I'm interested to find out. It's a James Bond movie I have not seen. Also, all of the movies in this set look like this. This same graphic design, except for Spectre. It is a completely different looking disc. And I believe the reason for that is because this is a set that they had sold before Spectre came out. And then, it seems, redid when Spectre came out. So I'm thinking what they did with that is they reprinted the sleeve. They reprinted, like, the paper inserts. And they added the extra disc, but then otherwise all the other discs are exactly the same. I think that's funny, but either way, I get to settle in for another James Bond movie and watch Spectre. And I would give 007 Spectre an 8.1 out of 10. It's a really good movie. It felt like a modern but real James Bond film. As the back of this box has no description, I'll go to the list of descriptions I downloaded when I bought that set. This being the last of the films in that little set. It's the last of the descriptions on this list. Spectre. A cryptic message from Bond's past sends him on a trail to uncover a sinister organization. While M battles political forces to keep the Secret Service alive, Bond peels back the layers of deceit to reveal the terrible truth behind Spectre. So, this feels like a real James Bond film. How do I describe that? Let's start with Daniel Craig's era, because that is what the modern Bond films are. First off, since modern Bond films, they've been a continuous story. Before that, only certain ones have really mattered what order you watch them in. Modern James Bond, watch them in order. Don't skip one. You could kind of get this one if you haven't seen the others, but really, you need to watch Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, and Skyfall to really catch what's going on in this film. Now, of the previous film, Casino Royale, it was its own thing. It didn't feel like previous James Bond movies, because it was an origin story. It was very different. A lot of the movie, he was rough and tumble and not at all like James Bond, and then a lot of the action being a card game. Different kind of movie. Quantum of Solace didn't feel all that much like a James Bond movie because it was bad. And it was poorly told. Sorry. Not sorry. Skyfall, now it felt like a love letter to James Bond. Like it was a fan of James Bond movies, but it turned things on its head. It instead of a lot of the times where it could have followed the formula, it decided to deliberately break the formula to do something interesting, which was fun, and I loved it. This one feels like a James Bond movie. It opens with the gun barrel shot. They put that at the end previously or done other things with it, but this one goes back to opening it. And then we get to an amazing opening shot. Now, I don't mean like the opening scene, like, I mean, yeah, the helicopter fight is cool, and the blowing up of the building is cool, but before that, our opening shot. In Mexico City, on Dia de Muertos, our camera comes down over this parade, and we follow this guy that is important walking the other way. He's masked, we don't see who he is, but he's important. You can tell by the focus and following him, and as he passes another man, he becomes the focus. He's important. Camera goes past, you see the eyes through the skull mask. Daniel Craig, we know it's James Bond. He then also walks against a crowd. He's with a woman. They're going into a building. Camera follows him. They go up to a room. A little romance, and he's like, I'll be right back. As he steps out the window and starts walking along the railing of the building. And he's going down now above this parade, this massive parade, down these buildings where he is basically following that first guy we sought to kill him. But it is this long, beautiful, continuous shot that I, as a filmmaker, as someone that studied film in school, as someone that does that, I'm like, it's so beautiful. Such a beautiful opening shot. The movie would have been fine without doing that. But it was a beautiful way to open the movie, and I definitely appreciate it. Anyways, we go on, and there's this contention. He gets back to MI6. Our new M is kind of like, what? You weren't even supposed to be there. What are you blowing up a building for? He's like, the guy was going to blow up a stadium. I stopped it. He's like, but you're not even on duty. You're not... And James isn't giving him anything. We move forward a little bit, and he shares information with Moneypenny. He has a video that arrived to him from previous M, Judi Dench's M. She sent him a video, she sent him a name, and directions to go to that person's funeral. Cryptic message from his past. So he's following previous M and not telling current M. That is what he is doing. And in doing so, that's why he was in Mexico City to kill the person he killed. And now he's basically been told by current M, you're grounded. He goes to Q and gets tracked. But basically, almost threatens Q enough to, give him a little time because he's gonna be away. He's like, cover for me. Having Moneypenny try and look up some information, having Q cover for him. And honestly, they trust him more than this new M. Even though they're also scared to go against their new boss. So, we see that now he's traveled abroad again, and he's going to the funeral, where he is basically trying to get information for what is previous M having me track down. And he's able to find the widow of the person he killed, get information to go to a meeting of this organization with this shadowy figure. It's Spectre, of course, it's Blofeld, talking to his group. And Blofeld, after henchman guy shows show of force to one of his other people, he calls out James Bond. He calls him out. He's up off in the distance, but he's noticed, and noticed by name. And James notices who this person is. Now, as an audience, we don't know. We'll get to that later. But, so he, cool car chase with the guy that just showed force in the meeting, chasing after James, I think through Rome. As James is on the phone with Moneypenny trying to get information. And from what she's able to tell him, he tracks it down to, was it Mr. White? Who was in, like, the end of Casino Royale and in Quantum of Solace. And basically he tracks down to where this guy is. He's like, you know what I need. Now he's got a new name, it's this series of tracking with all this travel. All this travel, with interspersed with action and chases and just this moving around. And the travel feels like a classic James Bond movie. It feels like we're just going to awesome location to awesome location. So we tracked this guy down to this place where he's set up base, and he's basically ready to die. But he's not really giving up information, even though he doesn't like the people he used to work for. Well, he won't give up the information, but he will say, okay. James figures out he's trying to save his daughter. I'll protect your daughter. Okay, so ask her about this word. She knows. So then we go to this beautiful mountaintop, like, psychology ward. I don't know. Where she is working. He offers, hey, I'm going to help. She's like, no, I hate my dad's business of death. I don't want to get involved with any of this. But then she gets kidnapped anyways because the reason he was offering to help is because they're after her. Duh. So James goes about rescuing her while Q is looking up a ring that James found a while back. He's tracking down information on it for James. James rescues the girl, of course, after a cool plane versus Jeep chase. And Q basically says, hey, that person that you were looking into that we're all like, he died in an avalanche long, long ago. What are you doing? You're right. He is alive. The person that you say you saw heading up this organization, maybe they're not dead. Okay. But they appear to have been dead for many, many years. So now James has this woman with him, the Mr. White's daughter, and they go to visit a hotel that her father went to with her mother, and later with her, and then continued to go to after he divorced her. There's clearly something, like, this is the place that he said that his daughter would lead him to get the information. So he knows there's information hidden here. And you see a little mouse on the floor. As like he's torn apart like the fireplace, and he's just trying to figure out, what is here? Why am I being sent here? You see this mouse on the floor, and he acts like he's about to shoot it, and I'm like, he can't shoot it. That mouse is going to lead him to where the information is. Obviously, I know, as a moviegoer, that mouse has the answer. And of course it does. He decides not to shoot it, which also is kind of good, because it's like a hotel in the middle of the night. Might be heard. But the mouse goes to a little hole in the wall, and he looks over, and he punches his way through the wall, and finds secret room with information on tracking down, well, what we learned to be Blofeld. So now he has a location, and he's able to transport that information to, like, Moneypenny Q. Around this time, this sea this new department that's coming in and saying, hey, we don't need no MI6. We don't need, like the same issue that previous M was dealing with the last movie. They're trying to shut down spies. No need for spies. Gather information, drones, digital age, move on. They're still doing it, and now they're putting up an office, and they're getting this union of a whole bunch of nations to all collect data together, which of course New M is very concerned about. But what if that data ends up in the hands of the wrong person? And who's making the decisions on how to use it if not the carefully trained, 00 agents? Who's making the decision to kill or to not kill? But bureaucratic tricks and underhanded politics happen, and this new initiative is passed, where they're going to be basically removing the MI6, the 00 agents. And so as Q and Moneypenny come to New M with this information of, hey, we know where James is going, we can help. And he's like, no, delete that. Delete what we've been tracking James with, get rid of it, because whatever information we have, now they have access to. So just delete it. He's on his own. It feels like, well, is he abandoning James? Or is he just trying to keep him safe and trusting that James can do what James can do? We're not sure, but because you're never sure if this New M is really on James's side or not. Anyways, so they do, and James and the psychiatrist, the doctor, Mr. White's daughter, who he's traveling with, they are headed out towards this spot in the desert that on maps is labeled as nothing, but on a satellite image shows that it's really something. And they travel there most of the way by train. They have a train. Oh, I just see them sitting like passengers in a train. I'm like, oh, I'm a big fan of From Russia with Love and the use of train there. But also, like, trains have been in many of the James Bond movies, and it just feels like classic James Bond to be on a train. And that's not all. They get dressed up, they go for a drink, and then the guy that's sort of been chasing them a few different places shows up again, and they have a brawl through the train. They're busting through walls. They're fighting on the train, and it feels so good. Oh, it's great action. I loved it. It's an amazing, just punching and like grabbing things around the train to stab each other with or whatever. Just awesome. Awesome fight scene on a train. And eventually they dispose of him, working together. And then they get to the stop and basically are picked up by Blofeld's men, taken to his compound facility, treated like guests, Villain and James, on sociable terms. Shown his facility where he's collecting information. And in fact, this new C, who is enacting this plan, is working for him to expand the information that Spectre has. Because he is Spectre. And then he does some sort of torture scene where he's torturing James by like drilling into parts of his head and neck. I don't like it. But James is working to get his watch off behind his back while this is going on, because it's a Q watch, gadgets. Yes, nice. What were you expecting? An exploding pen? We don't go in for that anymore. He has an exploding watch. Anyways, He's torturing, and during this torture scene, we learn that they're connected. We learn that he no longer goes by whatever name James knew him as, that he's in fact now Blofeld. And we learned that Blofeld had killed his father because when James, as a young man, was orphaned as a boy and went to live with this family for a couple years, this father took him in, said, treat him like a brother, cared for James, and I guess Blofeld got jealous, killed his father, made it seem like he'd also died in the avalanche accident, disappeared, and that's where he went off to become Blofeld. But so James and Blofeld have a past together. So anyways, with help of our leading lady, James gets her the watch so she could toss it at just the right moment to Blofeld's feet, blow him up, break him free. They run out, blow up the complex, escape on a helicopter. Yay. Meanwhile, the MI6 loyals, New M, Moneypenny, Q, and basically old M's assistant, who's now, I guess, New M's assistant, are going to a safe house where they find that James has arrived to provide the information of what has happened, that this new C is giving this information to Spectre, evil organization, and so they all set off to fight. Girl, leading lady goes her separate way. She can't get back into this life, and things happen. James gets captured and taken away. So the other group goes on to the new cyber information building to confront the guy and stop this system from going live that's going to give Spectre all this information. They confront that while James is brought to old MI6 office, the one that blew up last movie. He breaks out, he goes through, and we see more ties, because Blofeld, the reason that this is tied to La Chef and leading lady from Casino Royale and Mr. Green and Mr. White and whatever the creepy crazy bad guy from Skyfall, it's all tied together, but it's not tied together from anything in the previous movies. It's tied together because Blofeld says they were all working for me. So that's, but it ties everything. And basically he goes into this, as James goes through the wreckage of old MI6, he finds him. He goes to this, I am the author of your pain. And I got your current crush hidden somewhere in this building, and you got 3 minutes to find her. It's gonna blow up, because the building's all rigged for demolition, and he starts the timer. So he escapes. New M deals with the bad guy of this movie, that's setting up the whole messed up, collect all the information and give it to Spectre. James finds the girl just in time, and they escape. But wait, no, do they? They were almost at the exit, but they went the other way. Why? Because as he was exploring, looking for Blofeld in the rubble, or in the ruin, he passed a boat. And as he runs the other way, I'm like, he's going for the boat. And then they cut to him in the boat. So fun. He goes out back on the river Times, and he's chasing the helicopter that Blofeld's in, and he's shooting it, and he shoots it down. And at this point, also, Blofeld has his scar from the explosion when James blew up his complex, whatever. He ended up in the explosion. He got a big scar. The scar across his eye that Blofeld traditionally has. James gave it to him. Awesome. Helicopter goes down. James confronts him on the street, and Blofeld's basically like, "Kill me. Do it. Do it." James drops the quip, ejects the bullet. Out of bullets. I have something more important. He walks away while New M and the police come up to arrest Blofeld. James returns to leading lady, who couldn't get involved in this life. She didn't want to go back to being with killers. It's what her father was, and she couldn't ask James to leave it, but he leaves it for her. And then we get a final scene where he goes into Q, and Q's like, I thought you were done. And he's like, I am, but I need one more thing. And then we see him and the girl, or James and the girl, in the old traditional car that Q was fixing back up. That's her, and they're driving off. Wonderful shot. Which is another thing. The movie ends with James getting the girl. It feels like a traditional James Bond movie. Instead of breaking the mold, they lean into the mold. It feels like a real James Bond movie. And I've loved all the other ones leading up to it, don't get me wrong. But this one, it feels like what I want it to feel like. It does the things I want it to do. It is predictable in all the ways I want it to be predictable. We start with James down the barrel of a gun. We have an awesome action-packed opening. James continues to track things down, travel from place to place, having cool battles, fights, chases, cool cars. James is sociable with the villain before confronting him as an antagonist. They have an awesome scene in a train, and in the end, James gets the girl. It's the James Bond movie I want the James Bond movie to be, and it was so good. Now, it also, we know there's another movie, of course, because it's come out now. And also, the credits end with James Bond will return. So even though this basically ends with James Bond retiring, we know something's going to bring him out of retirement. Which almost makes me feel like, is the title of the next movie No Time to Die just basically saying, like, he doesn't, like, he gets pulled back into the work because he doesn't have time to go just finish off his life and die peacefully. He has to keep going. Is that what that means? Is that what that title was referencing? Maybe. I don't know. But it feels like it because this movie ends with him basically retiring. For this to be a modern James Bond movie that I have never seen before, I was greatly pleased with how much I enjoyed this movie. It was a real trip. It was great. Also, having Blofeld also helps it feel like a traditional James Bond movie. He was the traditional villain. And he hasn't been around for a long time. And the thing is, I don't know, I suspect he's in the next one, right? Because he didn't kill him. He arrested him. And the dude, Spectre has people everywhere, right? Like, that's the whole thing with Spectre, is like, they've infiltrated. Like, even the fact, like, they say Quantum was us. I feel like Quantum was just, like, if they should have just called Quantum Spectre at the time, because they described Quantum as, oh, we have people everywhere and all that kind of thing. It's like that, it's Spectre, it's just, I guess, another name for it. I don't know. I don't know why they did Quantum in the first place. But that kind of mindset of we've infiltrated everything. And if you remember then, Quantum had someone under previous M's employ, like, that was one of her guard, who'd been with her for ages, but they worked for Quantum, which means they were working for Spectre. Who's to say there's not someone else, obviously in the prison system, but also in MI6 or whatever, that's working for Spectre. Anyways, I have rambled on for a long time, describing what happens in the movie, basically, but I think my energy level and excitement of what things I remember probably helped to express why I felt so positively about the movie. At least I hope so, because that's kind of how I review movies, is I just talk about what happened and get excited about things. Anyway, but I'm gonna call it a night. Thank you for joining me. Join me as my journey continues.